Good morning, Cowboys Nation. Welcome to another episode of the Writer's Block podcast. I am your host, David Howman, joined as always by my two amazing co-hosts, Brandon Clements and Chris Halling. We're coming to you this Wednesday morning after another Cowboys loss. We've got a few of them now, 5 in a row, and still no wins at AT&T Stadium, no home wins for the Cowboys this season after going undefeated there in the regular season last year. And in true fitting Cowboys fashion, for as bad as their season has gone, our own podcast has been having technical difficulties as we're trying to record this episode. So if at any point throughout this episode it sounds a little off, something sounds weird, you hear weird noises, that may just be us being our own quirky selves, but it's probably all the technical difficulties that we're having, and we're handling it and powering through it to come to you on this Wednesday morning talking all things Cowboys, as painful as it might be. Chris, how are you doing, just in a general sense?
Were you talking to me or Brandon? See, like I was lagging already, so I couldn't. If it was me, then yeah. I'm not doing. You know. It's crazy because all I heard was "How are you doing?" I didn't hear the name because you were all frozen. Anyway, somehow our internet's worse than the Cowboys. Yeah. No, somehow our internet is worse than the Cowboys. I'm not doing the best, but honestly, this is honestly not the worst, because the more that the Cowboys keep losing, the more the Cowboys are going to have a better draft pick in April. So, in my opinion, just keep playing Cooper Rush and keep sucking because I want a better draft pick. And, like it may hurt now, but, if they can get a Travis Hunter, then, maybe I'll not feel as bad about it, come April.
Yeah, I think, Chris, I'm pretty much in the same boat with you. I'm all aboard the tank. I think Cooper Rush is a great tank commander, but I know we have the number one, the founding member and president and vice president and all the different things of the Trey Lance fan club in our midst with Brandon. So Brandon, I'm sure you're not on board with keeping Cooper Rush in the starting lineup, but other than that, because we have a whole bunch of Cowboys things we're going to get into, but yeah. Where's your mindset? Are you kind of like me and Chris, where it's like, yeah, it sucks to see us lose, but at this point, there's no real point in still trying to win and still winning games at this point for the season?
Yeah, I'm in full tank mode at this point. Yes, it's been a rough few weeks here. I wasn't able to do the show last week because I'm just like the Cowboys. I'm broken right now. So I literally my foot is in a cast right now as we're recording. So yeah, it's been a very interesting stretch, not only for me personally, but the Cowboys haven't been great. It's been brutal to watch, and I mean, I guess the difference here for me is, like, I think we're all on the tank train, like, at this point. And looking at tankathon.com, like, right now as of recording, the Cowboys are in the 9th pick slot, which, last time I checked, Ashton Jeanty from Boise State might be a good player there. I know Howman's not a running back in that early or first round, but I think it could be interesting. If they move up a little higher, they could go get Hunter or Shedeur Sanders to maybe lure Deion. So there's a lot of possibilities here. But for me, I want to see what the Cowboys can do with Trey Lance. Like, and here's the other thing: if it, to me, there's nothing about Cooper Rush that makes me excited for the rest of the year. I want to at least see what Trey Lance can do, and let's see if he can grow as a player. And also, they're probably going to tank at the same time because his team's is not very good. But I'd like to see what they can get out of Trey Lance. Obviously, it sounds like he's going to have a package of plays for the Commanders game coming up. So I'm hoping by Thanksgiving that it's Syracuse legend Tommy DeVito versus Trey Lance on Thanksgiving. So I'm hoping that's what's going to happen. But yeah, we'll see what happens. And it's been a rough few weeks in general. So I'm looking forward to being a Syracuse guy. Born and raised in Syracuse. I'm all aboard Syracuse football right now and Syracuse basketball to keep me going, because the Cowboys are just right now.
Yeah, and for my own college related reasons, I'm having a great year. Arizona State is they're 8-2. I had to like double check because it doesn't sound right to say that they've won that many games in a season. They won 6 games the last 2 years combined. So we're having a good year down in Tempe, even though I don't live in Tempe anymore. But then there's the Cowboys. So it's like Saturday nights, we get a good time, we get a win. You know, if they beat BYU this week, they control their destiny to get to the Big 12 title game. Then Sunday comes around, and you have to remember, the Cowboys play again. And man, it's been rough, and we're about to get a lot of Cowboys football in a very short period of time. We've got, you know, they play the Commanders this upcoming Sunday, and then there's a Thanksgiving game against, like you said, Tommy DeVito, Tommy Cutlets. Not feeling great about either of those games. But again, it's all for the greater good, which is getting a better draft pick, whether it's Ashton Genty, whether it's Travis Hunter, whether it's a good player outside of those two guys. So our technical difficulties have caught us again. Chris is temporarily not with us. But it's fitting because, again, you know, the wheels are falling off of this team. Wheels are falling off this podcast. You know, it's Cowboys are just in a dire state, and that leads us to what we're going to kind of really talk about in this episode. Is we're just going to have a good old fashioned venting session. There's a popular podcast out there. My wife loves listening to it, and it's called I've Had It. And every single episode, they just talk about things that they've had it with, you know, random stuff that they just are annoyed with and bothered by. Every now and then my wife will play me an episode and be like, oh, it relates, you know, to something that we've vented about. And it struck me that, you know, this week I just feel like there's so many things to complain about. So we're going to do a Dallas Cowboys version of I've Had It this week. And just, you know, we all have a couple of things we really want to talk about and we just want to rant about. So we're going to get some things off our chest. Brandon, what is the number one thing that you have just had it with?
Well, for me, it's the play of the offensive line. I know we talked a little bit about the Trey Lance situation, which obviously that was kind of in the open. But for me, it's the offensive line. You know, and I was just, you know, doing some research, a little bit of recon, because I know we were talking about this in the pre-show, you know, pre-planning of the show for this week. And for me personally, like Zach Martin, I mean, he's a warrior. He's going to be a Hall of Famer, you know, 5 years after he's done, which I think it's going to be after this year. The injuries are piling up for him. Like, he was the Iron Man for so long. And, you know, I'm so thankful that the Cowboys drafted him instead of Johnny Manziel way back when. And, you know, he's had a hell of a career, but these injuries are piling up. And you know, seeing him last night, well, for me, actually it is. You know, so Monday night, excuse me, it was just brutal. Just watching him, he's a shell of himself. He didn't look good. Didn't look like Zach Martin. So for me, honestly, at this point, you know, he's a tough guy. He's probably going to want to play, you know, on a short week. Who knows, you know, how that'll unfold. But for me personally, I think this is a good time to shake things up along the offensive line. And for me, and again, it's, you know, it all depends on injuries and, you know, who's going to be available, because who knows who's going to be available this coming week. There's different reports that, you know, we might see Marshawn Nealon back in the mix. Like that's a possibility, for example. I mean, I know McCarthy was putting stuff out there on the press conference, but focusing on the offensive line, for me, I think it's a good time to reshuffle, you know, especially in our mindset, it's kind of tank mode. But at the same time, when you're doing these, you know, these kind of quote unquote tanks, you're still going to try to win football games. But in the same time, you're going to do it more so where you got some young guys that haven't gotten a lot of playing time, and you're going to stick them out there and see what you got in those players. And the first name that comes to mind, and, you know, and for me in limited action, I felt like he's looked pretty good, is Awesome Richards. I think I'd like to see some more Awesome Richards, and call me crazy. That's fine. You know, it's, you know, the Cowboys have done this to me this year, but I would like to see him play at left tackle. I mean, he, you know, looking over his college stats, I know that's college, it's not the NFL. He had over 1,000 snaps at left tackle in college, and he was a very good player in the ACC at UNC at North Carolina. And, you know, I think in limited duty here in the NFL, I think he's done I think he's done a decent job. And I think with more exposure, more playing time, I think that's something the Cowboys, I would love to see the Cowboys kick the tires on. So I'd like to see him at left tackle, which leads me to the other side of the fence, which is Tyler Guyton. Tyler Guyton, he played over 1,000 snaps in college at right tackle. To me, he's better suited at right tackle. I think. I think he's just been, he's doing the best he can. I mean, he's a young player. You know, it's a whole different mindset and a whole different technique when you're going from left to right side. You know, on the offensive line. So I think he's better suited at right tackle, and I think that could be a good move for him going forward. So I'd like to see him potentially move over to the right side at right tackle and see what he can do there. And you know what? And if it worked out that way, where you draft a guy late in the first round and he becomes a stud at right tackle, I'm okay with that. And then, you know, of course, then you move that part over there. Then you have Terrence Steele, and you know Terrence Steele's obviously at right tackle. He's not great at pass protection. I think we all can agree on that. I think anybody that watches Cowboys football games can agree that he is not good in pass protection. Like, it's just, he's a turnstile, but he's one of the best road graders on the run game. He's a great run blocker. And for me, and this obviously comes down to a Zach Martin, you know, where he's going to be at. If it were me, I would slide Terrence Steele at right guard at this point and just see what he can do there. You're on the hook with him until he's not a free agent until 2029. So we got a lot of years left on his contract. And that's a big, bad contract. But let's try to make him earn some of that money. And maybe a move to guard would justify the kind of money you're paying him, because right now he is vastly overpaid for his production. So I would like to see him move in at you know, right guard, you know, and obviously just to see what you got there. I think Tyler Smith stays at left guard, and I think he's done a heck of a job. He's been the best player along the offensive line for the Cowboys all season. And I think Cooper Beebe, he's taking steps forward, and I think he's going to be a pretty solid center going forward. So I think Cooper Beebe and Tyler Smith should stay right where they are. And the other three spots, I think we should kind of rotate the three players I mentioned, and then, you know, go from there and just see what we got, because right now it's whatever combination you got right now, it's just not working. And, you know, I think in some aspects you got to shake things up to see what you have in these particular players. And I think that would be a good start. And let's see what we got on the offensive line, because if things are not turning out very good by the end of the year, and there's no hope for a turnaround, the Cowboys might be going at number 9 where they are right now, projected offensive line. And I don't know how many people are going to like that because of the other needs that the Cowboys have. So I'd like to see them shuffle the deck, see what you got with the players that you already have on the roster. And maybe we could salvage not using a first-round pick on an offensive lineman again. That would be fantastic.
So yeah, I was with you right there up until the very end, because I am, as of right now, team take a true left tackle in the first round. Obviously, you know, it's middle of November. We don't know what the board is going to actually look like. We don't even know where the team's going to be picking. So it's foolish to really put all your chips into, you know, one pool of like potential pathways for the draft. But I mean, I agree that this line needs to be reshuffled. And I'll say this, like you said, Tyler Smith and Cooper Beebe, they're doing fine. Absolutely. They're doing, I think, actually pretty darn good. They've both given up 15 pressures between the two of them, or each of them has given up 15 pressures on the year. Beebe's given up 3 sacks. Tyler Smith's given up 1 sack. Those are good numbers. You can live with that for both of those guys. Honestly, I think Tyler Guyton has looked solid at left tackle for a rookie. You know, he's at 21 pressures allowed. He's at 5 sacks allowed. Those aren't great numbers. Those aren't numbers you're going to win with at left tackle. But when you consider he's a rookie and you consider that he hasn't played this position before, all in all, not bad. It's the other two that we talked about that's a problem. Obviously, with Zach Martin, I mean, he's a Hall of Famer. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer. He probably should not be playing right now. Regardless of performance, I mean, it's very, very clear he's not playing at 100%. And he's struggling, and it's difficult to watch him go through this. But he's been bad this year, and I think anybody who's honest with themselves knows that. I tweeted during the game that Zach Martin would be the worst offensive lineman on this team if it weren't for Terrence Steele. And Terrence Steele has been awful. How awful has he been? He's been pretty darn awful. He's got 33 pressures given up on the year. Only one other offensive lineman in the entire NFL has given up more. Steele also has given up 9 sacks. Nobody's given up that many in the NFL. So he's one of the worst pass blockers in the entire NFL this season. And that's not hyperbole. That's looking at the numbers and comparing it to the rest of the NFL. He has been, like you said, a turnstile. And to your point about the contract, I mean, they inked him to a pretty large deal. They can get out of it after the 2025 season. But you still got to have him on the books in 2025. So, I mean, one way or another, he's on the team next year, unless Jerry's going to take that, that dead cap, which I doubt. And I mean, it's not like you can trade that contract because who's going to trade for him at this point? I do want to see him play at guard, especially if Zach Martin isn't going to be playing for the foreseeable future. But I think in the long term, though, if you get a guy in the first round, if you can get a guy like LSU's Will Campbell or the Longhorns left tackle Kelvin Banks Jr. Again, I mean, the season's still going on, so as far as being able to watch and evaluate these guys, you don't even have a full picture, but those two guys have been playing at a very high level. If you can get one of those guys, move Tyler Guyton back to right tackle, and then just see what you've got in Terrence Steele at right guard next year. Because, I mean, I think we all know Zach Martin is not playing in Dallas next year. If he plays anywhere next year, he's probably doing what Tyron Smith did and going in free agency. But it sure sounds like this is his last year. And for sure, I feel like it's probably his last year in Dallas either way. So see what Terrence Steele can do at right guard. If not, I mean, you've got Austin Richards, you've got TJ Bass. You can always add a guard in the draft or in free agency. I know the Cowboys don't like to do free agency, but
clearly,
yeah, this offensive line, I mean, honestly, it's been bad this year, particularly on the ground, which I think is another thing. Like Terrence Steele is a good run blocker, but this has been one of his worst years as a run blocker since he came in the NFL. Like that's the other thing is the thing he does well, he hasn't even done well this year. He's had some good moments here and there, but he's been inconsistent. And you know, they need to fix this offensive line. I think they've got some good players. I think Guyton, even if they keep him at left tackle, I think he's shown enough this year to where I would believe in his development because he has the upside. And the fact that, you know, he's not even a full year into playing a new position and he's missed some time here and there. Like, you know, I'm not going to be, you know, super mad if they keep him at left tackle going forward, but they got 3 young guys with a good potential on this line, but they just got to figure out the rest of the picture. And I think they got to get that right, whether it's Dak Prescott, whether it's Cooper Rush, because Cooper Rush was in this game against the Texans, he was averaging 2.3 seconds per throw. That's pretty darn fast. That's one of the fastest times to throw from this week of games. And he still got sacked 5 times. Like,
not good.
That can't happen.
No, absolutely.
And a lot of it was Terrence Steele. And when it wasn't Terrence Steele, it was one other guy, you know, getting beat and it turned into a sack. So totally agree with you. They got to fix it. And I think the other thing too is, you know, depending on who the next head coach is, I loved in the game how, you know, Troy Aikman was saying like, oh yeah, it's going to be harder for them to extend Mike McCarthy after this kind of game. And I was like, that's a very optimistic way of looking at it there, that it was even in consideration.
Just a little bit.
There's probably going to be a new head coach next year, which means there's going to be a new offensive play caller, and most likely there's going to be a new offensive scheme. And that's going to dictate some of the changes to the offensive line as well. But I mean, something has to change here.
I agree. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, I mean, there's going to be wholesale changes. I mean, across the board, whether it's offensive, defensive. I wouldn't be surprised if Bones sticks around, because Bones is one of the premier special teams coaches in the league. So I don't think the special teams, the main special teams guys, like your doppelganger Trent Sieg and Brian Anger and obviously Brandon Aubrey. I'd be surprised if those guys are gone. And I feel like Bones will still be around. So I don't think you're gonna see familiarity next year from the special teams. But yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of wholesale changes. Head coach, offense coordinator, defense coordinator. There's going to be a lot of different names out there. I mean, that's for another time that we'll speculate on. But yeah, it's coming. I just, for me at this point, I obviously we're talking offensive line and just seeing what you got. I mean, that goes for the entire team. Like there's some young players on there. Obviously, Ryan Flournoy, I'd like to see some more out of him. Obviously, and I want to see some more Turpin. I really liked what Brevin Spann-Ford did on Monday night. I was very impressed by his performance. I feel like just off of that, he should jump over Luke Schoonmaker for the spot behind Ferguson. I really like what I saw. So did
you not like what you saw from Schooney in this game?
I'm not a big Schooney guy. I just I
didn't ask you if you're a Schooney guy. Did you like what you saw from Schooney in this game? Because he had a better game than Brevin Spann-Ford.
I think Brevin Spann-Ford played better, in my opinion. I think Schooney played good for a tight end 3 in my book. I just and that's the point. Like I want to see these young guys like that haven't otherwise gotten a lot of playing time or meaningful play snaps, all that. This is the time that this is the time for the Cowboys to do that and see what they have. So it doesn't just matter about the offensive line. It's for everybody. Like every position. Like Wanye Thomas needs to get some more run. Obviously, Marquise Bell, hopefully we'll see what happens with him. But just other young players, let's get them out there. I hate the word tank, but this year's lost. Like let's see what we got and then fix it.
I mean, I'll say this about Schooney, and I'm not like coming in here saying like Luke Schoonmaker tight end 1 or anything like that.
No.
But I mean, he had a great game. Like he had 3 different catches where he caught it as a Texans defender was like actively trying to decapitate him, and he held onto the ball all 3 times. Like he had some catches that just show the toughness, and then you saw some of the athleticism that he tested really well with in the combine. You saw some of that on some of these catches that he had. Brevin Spann-Ford was good too, but also I mean he had 4 catches, all of them he was like wide open for. It's not like he was, doing a lot of work to get these catches. The Texans defense just forgot about him
but he's hard to bring down.
He can pronounce his name, let alone know who he is. Which not to take away from Spann-Ford, but
Spann-Ford though, like every time he gets the ball, like being 6'6", 6'7", just being a big guy, like he was open in those situations, but he does more after the catch than I think Schooney does. That's just my opinion.
I mean, Schooney had more after the catch in this game, but I mean, either way, I mean, we're arguing about tight end 2 versus tight end 3.
Valid. That's how bad it's gotten,
Yeah, that's how bad it's gotten. Yeah, I mean, you want to see what you've gotten these guys. But at the other time, it's funny because we know CeeDee Lamb, we know what he is, right? And the fact that he had 90+ yards in this game, with everything going on with this team right now is impressive. Jake Ferguson, he hasn't had the year he wanted to have. He had an injury early on in the season. He left this game with a concussion. Mike McCarthy made it sound on Tuesday like Ferguson's not going to be good to go for this next game, which I would imagine probably means he won't play on Thanksgiving either. You want to be careful with those concussions anyway, just in general.
Yes.
But outside of those 2, what do they have? And I think that's been kind of the problem with the Cowboys all year is this offense doesn't have anything. Like Jalen Tolbert, I think, aside from this game, he's been having a good year. But again, he's not your wide receiver 2. He is the Cowboys wide receiver 2 by default, but he should not be. And then, I mean, Kevontae Turpin, I think, is a really awesome gadget player. The touchdown he had in this game, that's how you want to use him, right? Get him on some screens, get him on some touch passes, which have really not been a part of this offense at all. with Mike McCarthy or with Kellen Moore. Get him on some of those things, but he needs to be your gadget guy. We can't be, having him run, go routes like he was against San Francisco. He can't be running these comeback routes. That's not his game. You need somebody else besides that who can stretch the field, and they don't have it. And Jonathan Mingo isn't it, by the way. Chris, for what it's worth, Chris, I think his Wi-Fi router went the way of AT&T Stadium's roof and just completely collapsed. He will not be joining us for the rest of the episode. But he did say that one of the things that he's really had it with is the Cowboys making stupid trades. And in his honor, we're going to talk about that stupid trade, because the Jonathan Mingo trade, I mean, you give up a 4th-round pick for arguably the worst receiver on the one team out there that has been worse than your offense this year with the Panthers. And it's like you've got a whole bunch of guys in your passing game that cannot create separation. And Jonathan Mingo, his average separation number, which, by the way, it's a very flawed statistic, but it helps give some idea of how open guys are when they are throwing the ball. Mingo's average separation when he was with the Panthers would be the lowest of anyone on the Cowboys. And I mean, you already have an offense that can't separate. And so I'm like, I get that they love, we've got 2 years of really cheap control for this young rookie guy, but he doesn't fix any of the problems with your offense. And you just gave up a 4th-round pick, which the Cowboys have had really great success with 4th-round picks. If it was a 2nd-round pick, I'd be fine, ironically, because the Cowboys can't do nothing with these 2nd-round picks. So you might as well, I mean, they're going to light that pick on fire no matter what. You might as well use that. But in all seriousness, I didn't enjoy that. I didn't enjoy that trade. The Trey Lance trade, where they gave up a 4th-round pick for Trey Lance, and now they don't even want to use him, which we've talked about Trey Lance far too many times on this show. But at this point, I'm like, the only thing that I can see for not playing Trey Lance is you think that the athletic upside that he has makes you too competitive, essentially. Is like Cooper Rush, we've seen now 2 weeks in a row, like he's going to get you a top 5 pick. And maybe the thinking is Trey Lance is not good, because he's not. I mean, we saw him a little bit against the Eagles. We saw him the whole preseason. He's still very, very raw. But every now and then he has these plays where he takes off with the ball, or he's got a great arm. He can launch it deep to CeeDee Lamb, to Kevontae Turpin. And maybe that's just enough to, screw around and give you a win. And now suddenly you're picking 8th instead of 4th. And, and you've got a few players less than you had in the draft as options. But other than that, they gave up a 4th round for Trey Lance and don't know what they have in him. They gave up a 4th round pick for Jonathan Mingo. And I mean, you're bringing in guys to fit an offense that is not going to be what you run in a couple of months. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, it's awful. I will argue back a little bit. Like the 4th-round picks, I feel like, other than 2019 Tony Pollard, 2022 Fergie, they've missed a lot on these 4th-round picks too. So it's like, and the issue that I have though, hold on,
who's the guy throwing the ball?
Well, I'm talking the last 5 years. I know Dak was good in 16. To me, that's like a long time ago at this point. That's almost a decade ago for me. So I look at it in 5-year cycles, and that's how I look at it. But the point is, this this past year with the Trey Lance trade, yes, I am a Trey Lance guy, and I've been a big supporter of his since he was at North Dakota State. I've always been a supporter of Trey Lance, but they could have used that 4th-round pick instead of trading for Trey Lance, which. I liked it, but maybe they could have waited a little bit, maybe a 5th-round pick or whatever, but they could have gotten a running back. There's been some rookie running backs that have, that were drafted, on day 3, for example, like a Tyrone Tracy, he he's been playing good for the Giants, which we're going to see him soon enough. There's been some other players out there that were drafted in that area and later that have played some quality football. And the Cowboys don't have a running game. The running game is essentially non-existent. And I know the offensive line has to do partially with it, but we don't have a stud at running back. We just have a bunch of guys. And I'm not trying to say that in a bad way, but it just is what it is. And then, we gave up the 4th round pick for Mingo, which 4th round could be another year where you could get another quality running back depending on how things fall. And this trade looks worse and worse because that 4th round pick is probably going to be an early 4th round pick. So it's going to be a very decent pick where there's going to be a quality player that you're going to look at it and be like, gosh, we got Mingo. We could have gotten, whoever it is on the board that fell in the 4th round, but oh no, we don't have the pick. So it's, and the thing is, and the thing that irritates me is the Cowboys are always the mentality of the whole free agency thing where they don't do anything. And they're like, yeah, we like our guys and we want to, our draft picks are very important to us, blah, 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 blah. Let's be honest. They haven't drafted that well in recent memory. Let's go back to 2023. Another 4th round pick, Junior Fehoko. What's he doing? He ain't playing right now. He ain't playing on the Cowboys. It's to me, it's irritating that the team thinks so highly of themselves on the draft. They've made some good picks. Deron Bland, for example, that was a good find. Trayvon Diggs in the 2nd round. I know 2nd round picks haven't been the Cowboys' forte, but Trayvon's been a pretty good 2nd round pick. But overall,
he's like the only one that's really worked out for them.
No, you're right. And the problem is though, overall, it's just one of those things where the Cowboys think they're better drafters than what they really are, and they're afraid to go make moves. Like if you want to make trades, why are you trading for Jonathan Mingo? Like if you want to go get a guy, you could have gotten Devontae Adams, you could have gotten DeAndre Hopkins for less compensation or equal compensation. Like it's ridiculous. Or you could have done what the Ravens did and got Deontay Johnson for a lot cheaper. And Deontay Johnson was the best receiver on the Panthers this year. Mingo wasn't anywhere near the field really on the worst team in the league, and we give up a 4th. Like that's laughable. To me, it almost I'm a New York Knicks fan. Yes, I do root for one New York professional team. It was like for the longest time when the Toronto Raptors and the New York Knicks made a trade, it's like the Raptors always got one over. Like that's how I feel with every other team against the Cowboys in these trades right now. It's just the Cowboys. What have they really done in the last few years on these trades that have worked out? Like the Cooper trade recently wasn't so great. Obviously it was awful. Like the Trey Lance, that hasn't worked out. Mingo, I hope it works out. Like I hope we come back to this in like 2 years from now and we're like, man, we were really wrong about Mingo. But guess what? I don't think that's going to happen. I just don't know what we're going to see in Mingo. The whole thing is just a mess. I'm sick of the trades. Like I feel like between trades and free agency, like the Cowboys are just swinging and missing. And it's like, stop doing bargain bins. Like go get me some players. There's guys out there that you could have gotten like a Derrick Henry, Aaron Jones. There was receivers like we just talked about that you could have gotten as well. To me, it's just I'm irritated by the Cowboys' lack of. It's like they don't want to go out. They're like afraid to make moves. Like they're like, oh, we trust our guys. And it's to me that theory obviously isn't working. Let's reset. Let's see what the rookies got this year, or some of the other young players that aren't rookies. Let's see what they got, and then honestly, let's see what Trey Lance has. Like, and it could work out in a scenario if Trey Lance plays well enough. He's not gonna be a QB1 somewhere else right now. I just that's not gonna happen. But if he plays well enough, where they're like, okay, Dak's got a few years left. We have Trey Lance, and he's still very young. You could keep him on as a decent backup, and if the price is right, obviously. And that's the thing, backup quarterbacks are very important. And as we can see here, Dak Prescott goes down, the season's pretty much lost. But at this point, why don't we just use Trey Lance, see what he can do, and then we may have a quality quarterback that's young, still developing. But in case Dak gets hurt again down the line, you could say, okay, Trey Lance can get out there and win a few football games. Like I just like the whole Cooper Rush experiment. Like it's annoying, it's frustrating, and Jerry Jones is pretty adamant that he's going to keep Cooper Rush out there. At least that's what we've been hearing, from his, from what he's been saying. So it's very frustrating that this team is they're so like backwards thinking, and it's just to me, I'm just frustrated. I just want them to just get out of their, get their heads out of the rear ends and like start doing things the right way.
Yeah, well, and I think so. The thing that bothers me with what you said about Trey Lance, aside from even mentioning his name,
Yeah.
but I've heard this a couple of times of like, oh, if you find out you have something in Trey Lance, well, then you've got a young quarterback to groom for the future. But you just signed Dak Prescott to another extension. Like, he's your quarterback for the next 4 years. If he's not your quarterback for the next 4 years, it's because something has gone horribly wrong. And so the idea of like, oh, if Trey Lance turns out to be something great, and then we hold on to Trey Lance until Dak and his current deal is up. I mean, at that point, he's going to be, I think, 29 years old by the time Dak is off his current deal. Assuming he becomes the starter after that. Like, so now your plan for replacing your current franchise quarterback who's aging out at that point is a 29-year-old who's never been the starter. It doesn't really move the needle for me. But I will say this, as far as that fourth round pick that they traded away to get Trey Lance to let him sit on the bench for ever and ever and ever, the players that they got that were available between that fourth round pick and their next pick in that draft, which was in the fifth round where they ultimately took Kalen Carson. You mentioned Tyrone Tracy, running back, who's done really well with the Giants. The actual pick itself was used on safety Malik Mustafa, who's been pretty darn good for those 49ers. And as it currently stands, Cowboys have two safeties, and Donovan Wilson and Malik Hooker not having their best year, arguably having their worst year. You could have used a guy like Malik Mustafa, could have used Tyrone Tracy. Austin Booker, edge rusher out of Kansas, having a really good rookie year. Cam Hart and Tarheeb Still, two corners that are seeing regular playing time for the Chargers, who have one of the best defenses in the NFL. Cowboys could certainly use some bodies at corner. They signed Josh Butler to the active roster like less than 24 hours before playing the Texans and said, all right, you're going to go start for us. Other running backs, Audric Estime, who's gotten some action in Denver, Braylon Allen, who's playing with the Jets, Isaac Guerrero with the 49ers, Ray Davis, Will Shipley, and Bucky Irving, who has done pretty darn good as a complimentary back in Tampa with the Buccaneers, playing offsetting Arizona State legend Rashawn White. Obviously with the draft, everything, hindsight is 20/20, and we can all go back and cherry pick of like, oh, you should have done this, you should have done that. But I mean, you can get so much value nowadays with those fourth round picks, and trading it away for a quarterback that you really have no interest in ever seeing the field because you're committed to Dak Prescott. You're going to remain committed to Dak Prescott. It never made sense to me. Just like the Jonathan Mingo trade doesn't make sense to me. And it brings me to what I've had it with the most with these Cowboys, and it's the low-hanging fruit, but I've had it with Jerry Jones.
I think we all have.
All these things we're talking about come back to Jerry Jones in the end. Last week against the Eagles, it was such a beautiful moment as I was watching it in the game where Mike McCarthy, working with a backup quarterback, schemes up a play where CeeDee Lamb is wide open in the end zone. And all Cooper Rush has to do is just take the layup and put the ball in CeeDee's hands. You get a touchdown, and you have the lead over the Eagles with, a minute or so left in the first half, right? Mike McCarthy, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like, he's been just an ace with the play calls this year. But, I mean, he did a pretty darn good job on that play. The only thing that could possibly stand in his way there is Jerry Jones and his arrogance and his belief that he is more important than the laws of nature and the sun that shone through those windows directly into CeeDee Lamb's eyes and blinded him from being able to catch the easiest touchdown of his entire career. And I was like, that is the most perfect, beautiful metaphor for the way that this season has gone. Jerry Jones just finding all these creative ways to just absolutely undermine his coaching staff, absolutely undermine his players. And I mean, even in this game with the Texans, I referenced it already. They tried to open the roof and literally pieces were falling off. Like, this is an organization that is fundamentally crumbling, quite literally, from the foundation. And there's Jerry Jones has zero interest in changing things up. When you ask him about putting up curtains, even after CeeDee Lamb says he wants it, he says, well, why don't you just tear the whole stadium down? And a week later,
It looks like Howman is having some technical difficulties, folks. It's been one of those very interesting evenings as we record on Tuesday nights for Wednesday distribution. So it's been a rough go. Chris's Wi-Fi tapped out during the show, and looks like Howman has tapped out during the show as well. So we're just waiting for Howman to reconnect, and I'm the last man standing at this point. It's one of those situations where the technology gets the best of us, just like the rest of the NFL has gotten the best of us as Cowboy. With the Dallas Cowboys, it's a tough go, and with Howman talking about Jerry Jones with the curtains, everything under that umbrella, it's been fundamentally broken for a long time. I mean, you got to go all the way back to the 90s. I'm the elder statesman of the group, and I do remember those glory days as a very young kid. In the 90s, that's when I started becoming a Cowboys fan, and Jimmy Johnson, was really, he built those 3 Super Bowls. That's just the way that's just a fact. It wasn't Jerry Jones. Jimmy Johnson did the work on that. Let's all be honest. And then obviously with Jimmy Johnson, he scooted. So, there's Howman. I just been talking, man. I just been talking about Jerry Jones and Jimmy Johnson and all that. And I know you were, not to cut back into it, but the last thing I got before you really dropped out was you were talking about CeeDee Lamb and the easiest touchdown of his career because of the sun and without putting some shades up, no touchdown there. So I'll let you continue with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the easiest touchdown of his career. Mike McCarthy draws it up perfectly, making things easy on his backup quarterback. The only thing that can stop it is Jerry Jones and his arrogance and his belief that he has control over the laws of nature, that the sun won't shine in his receiver's eyes. And I mean, just the sheer arrogance of it and the stubbornness of, no, I don't want to put up curtains. But a week later, when Jake Paul wants to come in here and fight a 58-year-old guy to make extra money, he puts up curtains then, because that's more important than the Cowboys. And it underscores to me the fact that we're dealing with an owner who's also the general manager, who says time and time again, I'll do anything to win another Super Bowl. And then you ask him to do something as simple as rising up the curtains that are already there. It's not like he has to install curtains, like literally just pull them down, like cover up the window. And he goes, nope, can't do that. And if you're not going to do something that small, something that like minimal to help your players, you're not actually willing to do whatever it takes. And that's why, people are, ready for Mike McCarthy to be done. And I get it. Like this year's been tough. I don't think a new head coach is going to change one thing, because Jerry Jones is still going to be the one that is doing all this. He's making comments. He undermines his coaches in the press conference. He constantly creates a distraction, whether it's stadium tours, whether it's the sun blinding his players. I mean, football does not come first in Dallas. And I mean, and that's the thing, is like Mike McCarthy, when he was in Green Bay, football comes first. Football is the only thing that exists in Green Bay. That entire town, I mean, half the people who live there own the team collectively. Exactly. And guess what? He won a whole lot of games. He won a Super Bowl. He did something nobody's been able to do, since him, which is win a Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers. Nobody else can do it. And I mean, we saw Bill Parcells. Bill Parcells has won Super Bowls in the past. He couldn't do it in Dallas. I mean, nothing's going to change until something changes with the owner. And, Jerry Jones is not interested in doing what it takes to win. And I've had it. I've just had it with him, which is disappointing because I'm still stuck with him. That's not going away.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, he's an 80-plus-year-old man at this point, and let's be honest. While you were having your technical difficulties, I was going on my own little soapbox about growing up in the 90s. I am the elder statesman of the podcast, and I was fortunate enough to see those glory days and that glorious stretch where 3 out of 4 years they were in a Super Bowl. That one year they lost to the Niners in the NFC Championship game in a pretty good game. So they, in retrospect, they could have had four in a row. Like that era was so much fun. As a fan, I remember it very well. And I still have the VHS tapes. Yes, they still exist for all you young kids out there. I do have those, and that is the running joke.
VHS player?
I do. It's in storage. I haven't used it in years, but it's there. But that's the running joke, amongst all my Cowboys haters, and I am wearing the Just Hate Us Cowboys, shirt today. But yeah, they talk about like, oh, the last time the Cowboys won a Super Bowl, you could watch it on a VHS, like they just that kind of stuff. But the point is that those 90s, that wasn't Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones could take credit for all he wants in the 3 Super Bowls. Those 3 Super Bowls are Jerry Jones or Jimmy Johnson, excuse me. Jerry Jones takes all the credit for it.
JJs.
Yeah, I know exactly those pesky JJs. But Jimmy Johnson is responsible for those 3 Super Bowls. He was the architect. He was there as a coach for 2, and then he essentially the keys were handed to Barry Switzer with already a finished team ready to rock and roll. So Barry Switzer gets a Super Bowl. And yes, is it hard to win Super Bowls in the NFL? Of course. But when Jimmy Johnson literally gives you the keys to a Super Bowl team, Barry Switzer was able to win a Super Bowl with what Jimmy Johnson did. So Barry Switzer, should be, no disrespect to Barry Switzer, great coach in college, but Jimmy Johnson built that team ready for him, and he got the easiest Super Bowl ring, I think in the history of the game, because he was handed the keys to it. And let's be honest, like Jimmy Johnson, if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't be even having these conversations where the Cowboys have 5 Super Bowls and this and that.
Yeah,
we'd be 3 less.
Troy Aikman even said, I'm pretty sure it was Troy Aikman, that the very first practice, once Barry Switzer was the head coach, when he came in and the way he ran practice, because we all know, Jimmy was not exactly easygoing personality, very much the drill sergeant type, and he would get on you when you did something wrong. And Barry Switzer was very much not like that. And after the very first practice with Barry, I think it was Troy Aikman who said, like, that's when I realized, we were in trouble. We were not in it for the long haul anymore. This dynasty was about to come down. Because, and that's no disrespect on Barry Switzer, but he was very successful in college before coming to Dallas. Technically, he was very successful in Dallas as well. But when you have a coach like Jimmy Johnson with that kind of intensity, and then you switch to just a complete lack of intensity, there's going to be a let-up. There's going to be a noticeable let-up. You look at the Cardinals, not the same exact situation here, but they had Bruce Arians, who very similar personality to Jimmy Johnson. Bruce Arians is the kind, like he's a very charismatic guy. A lot of players love him because of who he is as a person, but at the same time, when you mess up, he's going to let you know about it. There was a video clip at one point where he fired, or they cut a practice squad player because he parked in Bruce Arians, I think, in his parking spot, when it was clearly labeled head coach's parking spot, and he was like, "Hey, if you can't follow the rules, we can't have you here." It's as simple as that. And it's cold-blooded. But also, when they moved on from Bruce Arians, they ended up hiring Steve Wilkes, who has since, he got fired after a year. He had a successful stint as the interim coach with the Panthers, one of the very few guys to actually succeed with the Panthers under David Tepper. But he was not the fiery personality of Bruce Arians. And the team took a huge step back. And, you got to have that kind of mentality. And even now, Mike McCarthy, I think, has a little bit of that mentality. He's more of the maybe not as much of a yeller as Jimmy Johnson, but he is that kind of mentality of, like, if you're not doing things the right way, like, we're not going to play you. I mean, he cut a guy in Green Bay right after he fumbled the kickoff, in the final seconds of a game where they were trying to come back and win. But at the same time, like, when you get undermined constantly by your boss, it's hard to actually implement that. So even if I think if Jimmy Johnson came in and coached this team currently, like, they would have the same exact problems because Jerry Jones is still going to make this Jerry Jones team.
Well, Howman, like, let's be honest. Like, I think we all know this, is, covering the team and being fans of the team as long as we have been. Jerry Jones, there's never been a microphone he doesn't like. So, like, he just talks and talks and talks. And you use the word undermine. He's been doing that forever, ever since he's owned the team. And the year he started owning the team was the year I was born, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was 1989, if I remember correctly. So my entire existence as a human has been Jerry Jones, as the boss, the CEO essentially of the Dallas Cowboys. And it's just, to me, it's always been frustrating to see, just the things he says, and it's very irritating. And as a fan, as long as I've been, I just, you get to a point where you're just like, okay, like, Jerry, like, we know you can market, like, you're a great salesman. You're probably one of the best salesmen out there. Like, you're a billionaire. You've been successful. Like, great, like, cool, that's awesome. But you know what you should do? You should take a page out of the Chiefs ownership with Mr. Hunt. Mr. Hunt doesn't really like the microphone. Like, when he talked at the latest Chiefs Super Bowl, people are like, oh, he does talk. Because he lets the football guys and gals, like, he lets the football people just do what they do, and essentially he sits in the background. Like, that's what good owners should do. Is, yes, you're great, you've built this empire, you're a billionaire, you've done this and that, you have the money to have a football team, but you also have the money to spend, you have the resources to spend on really talented people that can, build a franchise, build the players, get the right coaches in, and let them do it. You should be, at this point, like, Jerry Jones should have always just been the check cutter, so to speak. Like, yes, Jerry Jones, billionaire. Okay, great. Cut the checks, let the football people do football things, and stay out of it. But Jerry Jones doesn't, he can't keep his fingers off of it. Like, he has to be hands-on. And that's why the Cowboys have been what they've been. And as a fan, they've been, honestly, they've been a laughingstock. Like, nobody takes it seriously. Like, every year it's like, and even like ESPN just the past week, it's like, Herb Street, and I think Herb Street cut a promo on the Cowboys, like, oh, here we go again. Essentially, like, they're gonna get embarrassed again on national broadcast. Like, it's the same old Cowboys. Like, they just haven't done anything since Jimmy Johnson, really. Let's be honest, and it's frustrating because Jerry Jones, he's too stubborn to admit that he has flaws, and that's the problem. Like, good, talented people, whether you've made $1 million or you're just an average Joe Schmo, the good people out there that take steps in life, whether it's personally, financially, is when you're not good at something, you ask the person who's better at it to guide you and make you better. And in this case, make the Cowboys better. But Jerry Jones thinks he's great at everything, and it's just frustrating.
Yeah, and I mean, I've heard the phrase so much the last couple of weeks. Jerry Jones is the greatest salesman, and you just said it as well. And when I hear that, the only thing I can think of is, great, then sell the team. If that's what you're good at, sell the team. You're going to make a heck of a profit, and let us enjoy football again. But to end on a little bit of a high note, we're going to look at our prediction, or our records, making predictions, and it's getting close. Chris and Brandon are both tied at 77 and 44. It's pretty good. I'm not too far behind with all my zigging and zagging. I'm at 75 and 46. So I need one really good week to pull ahead of you guys, and I think we're going to get it this week. In the interest of time, and also really just avoiding another technical disaster and catastrophe. We're going to do our picks offline. We're going to put those picks out there for everyone to see, and we'll come back next week, and after I've done some special math, I'm sure I'll be ahead in these rankings either way. But we'll get that taken care of, and we will be on it next week. We're going to have a much better technological setup. I mean, it would have to be better.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of skipped a week with the picks too. So forgive us for that, folks. It's been a weird stretch, but we're gonna get this ship steered in the right direction. No serious icebergs or things like that. So we're gonna get back on track.
Yeah, we'll do a better job of getting back on track than the Cowboys are doing right now.
Yeah,
precisely because this show is not operated in any capacity by Jerry Jones. So that already puts us ahead of the game. But until next week, for Chris Halling, who's not with us right now, he was with us at the beginning. He'll be back next week. And for Brandon Clements, the icebreaker himself, I'm David Howman, signing off for the Cowboys. And Brandon, before we go, can you give us your most enthusiastic, how about them Cowboys?
How about them Cowboys?